parties, fellow debaters, and audience, thank you for your contribution to our debate. We, as the affirmative side, still strongly believe developed countries have a higher obligation to combat climate change. The opposing team have put forward 3 points. However, there are still some loopholes in each of them. Now I will explain it to you one by one. Firstly, you mentioned that history is irrelevant. This is certainly not true. According to the definition of climate change, it has been caused by the long-term historic emissions of the developed countries and their high per capita emission from industrialization till now. Thus, they should be responsible for their past behavior, as Doris has mentioned. Secondly, you mentioned that not all the developed countries are the major emitters, but as Tiffany put, climate change developed countries have contributed more to the damage, and since each nation has a responsibility for the harm it has caused, developed countries certainly have a higher obligation in combating climate change. Then, you said that the solutions need to be global and involve everyone. We admit that climate change is a global problem, and every country has to share the responsibility. But what we emphasize today is different nations have common but differentiated responsibility, not only because the pressure developed countries has placed on the global environment, but also, as Jennifer has elaborated, they have more financial resources and more advanced technologies. Actually, this consensus was reached in the Rio Declaration in 1992 by 150 countries, including the developed countries. Last but not least, your third speaker said developing nations are just as capable as developed nations in combating climate change. This can by no means hold water. Developing countries are still in the process of industrialization. Even if they want to play the major role, how can their capability allow this happen? Besides, developing countries also have the right to improve their comprehensive power. They have more urgent issues to deal with, such as eliminating poverty and national defense. Otherwise, it will enlarge the gap between the developing and developed countries, which will increase the unstable factors in the world. How can we solve a global problem on the price of causing another world problem? So as Taylor put, for developed countries, taking a leading role in combating climate change is actually a chance rather than a burden to them. Therefore, today's motion must stand. With all the above reasons, there is no denial that developed countries have a higher obligation to combat climate change than developing countries. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, as I'm the captain, it's my turn to sum up the arguments of my team. But before this, I would like to clarify the issue by pointing out where the affirmative team has gone wrong. Firstly, the first speaker of the affirmative team told us that developed countries have greater capability to combat climate change, while developing countries lack resources. However, our speakers have pointed out that some developing countries are as capable as those developed countries. She used China as an example to explain how competent China is in combating climate change and has rich resources. Therefore, it's unfair to push all the obligation on developed countries just because they are called developed countries. The affirmative team also tried to convince us that developed countries produce most pollution in history, so they have the responsibility to combat climate change and lead by example. However, it's wrong to compare the obligation among nations from the history and what they have done. In the past, people are even in the dark about what they have done to the environment and the harm they made. Our second speaker has also pointed out that some developing countries, such as China, with vast population, also make severe pollution. Therefore, the argument of the affirmative team is unconvincing. Moreover, the affirmative team told us that for developed countries, growing green is not a burden but an opportunity. However, our speaker pointed out that even growing green can bring forth benefits for the country. It doesn't mean that developed countries should share higher obligations. It should be optional for them. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to sum up the ideas of my team. In today's debate, we, the negative team, has proven why developed countries should share an equal obligation with developing countries, since they all make adverse contributions to climate change. Our first speaker draw attention to the fact that not all developed countries are the major emitters, and not all the developing countries does not play a role in causing climate change. She used the figures of carbon emission in 2008 as examples, explaining that two developing countries, China and India, have the top and the fourth largest carbon emissions. In contrast, a developed country, Switzerland, has only produced 0.14% in carbon emissions. Our second speaker spent time emphasizing that the economy is a global system and the solution should involve every nation. She pointed out that climate change leads to a drop of GDP, which affects the economy globally. She further suggested some ways for combating climate change by mutual efforts from every nation, rather than split solutions. Our third speaker tried to clarify that the capability of combating climate change between developed and developing countries are the same. He used China and Russia as examples, and the fact that they are two of the 5 permanent members in the United Nations Security Council shows that they are capable to combat climate change by means of their sources, rather than developing nuclear weapons. With the above reasons, we strongly believe that developed countries should share an equal obligation with developing countries, because they all make adverse contributions to climate change. Therefore, the motion today must not stand. Thank you.